Welcome to the Selling Show, where we unpack, repack, and break down exactly how CEOs, founders, and senior executives sell their ideas, point of view, and personal brand to the people who matter most. This is your host, David Newman, and you are in the right place if you want to build market eminence, amplify your influence, and attract high-value prospects, investors, partners, talent, and media opportunities with less chasing and more confidence. Let's go. I have real estate guru, investor to the investors, and the host of the High Ticket Success podcast, Mr. Dave Dubeau, with us today. Welcome to the show.
David Newman, it's an absolute pleasure. Thanks for having me on the show. It was my pleasure to have you on mine not that long ago.
Such a great conversation. Absolutely. Well, so you have achieved what we call market eminence in a couple of different industries, in a couple of different categories. I would love you to share just a little bit of your professional journey that brought you to the work that you're doing today, and we'll use that as our jumping off point.
Yeah, so I've been in business for myself since 1993. My first business, believe it or not, David, was a language training company in San Jose, Costa Rica. Wow. And that's where I fell in love with marketing because I was clueless. I had no idea, starting a business from scratch, no business experience. And that's where I stumbled across Dan Kennedy, Jay Abraham, all these kind of direct response gurus. So I took my little struggling language school from bottom of the pack to the top four in about 2.5 years in a very crowded market space with about 50 direct and indirect competitors. Fast forward 10 years, I decided to move back to Canada, dragging my poor little Costa Rican family, kicking and screaming all the way back to the great white north. People go, especially Canadians, go, Dave, tropical paradise, Costa Rica, frozen hinterlands, Canada, why? You don't realize what you got till you don't have it anymore, David. So my then wife and myself decided, Costa Rica is great, but Canada is a better place to raise the kids. So we did, but I had to start all over again from scratch. I hadn't been able to sell my business in Costa Rica very quickly. So there I was starting all over again. I wasn't going to do another language training company because, hey, it didn't really make sense. So I saw one of those late night infomercials that said, you too can get rich in real estate with little or no money down. I said, perfect. That's what I got. So I sent away for this course and put it to good use and did 18 deals in 18 months. That's when I kind of got into the whole real estate thing. Fast forward a couple of years, caught the eye of an up and coming real estate guru up here in Canada, kind of the Canadian version of Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Yeah. And helped work with him for, 7 or 8 years, helped grow his company. I was kind of the marketing guy for that. In and out of real estate. And for the last dozen years, fast forwarding, David, I've been working a lot with what are called real estate syndicators, fund managers, capital raisers, helping them to, in your language, kind of create eminence and raise private capital for their deals. And for the last while now, I've also started working with high ticket coaches, consultants, and advisors, doing the same thing with a very specific methodology, using a podcast as a direct lead generator. Hopefully that was a good synopsis.
Yes, amazing. And also people should know that you've written a couple of books along the way, correct?
I think I'm on number 10, if I'm not mistaken. So yes, I'm a big proponent of your whole being an author and speaking and podcasting, and it makes a ton of sense.
Yes, absolutely. Well, so the High Ticket Success podcast, you've had some amazing guests on, and sort of as we turn the corner.
You're one of them. You're one of my top
I know that's why I'm saying, but you've actually had some really great guests, not just me, but some really great guests, some top shelf people. And, I'm more like Maker's Mark, but, you've had all kinds of Blantons, and I'm using bourbon analogies here. So you'll get the drift. I'm curious, before we kind of dig into the methodology, which I think is brilliant, what were maybe a couple of the top lessons of the guests that you've had on your show so far? Like, what were some of the big ahas that they shared with your audience?
I've had some pretty successful guests on the show. Some of the top ahas, my friend Dan the Man Locke, he's very, very sharp. And he's kind of polarizes people. So people either love him or hate him, which isn't necessarily a bad thing.
No, it's a great thing. It's necessary.
It is necessary. And I tell you what, one thing I admire so much about Dan is just his ability to pivot and change and go after new things. So he's completely changing the way he does business, even though what he's been doing has been very, very successful. So again, he just sees the whole writing on the wall with AI and the challenges it's going to create for course creators and just the way we can create, take in content. So that was a big aha that really pops into my mind. Another one was just good, between the ears type stuff from really, really great coaches like Steve Chandler, for example. So I've been a big fan of Steve for many, many years, and just his whole philosophy and kind of easygoing way about doing business is a refreshing change from some of the type A personalities that we deal with on a regular basis.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I think one of Steve's things is like charge 10 times what your competitors are charging, and it'll open up a whole new world for you.
Yeah, that was a big takeaway for him. That's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then his marketing is very, very low key, even though he writes books galore. It really is about word of mouth in their situation and their.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So let's talk about now the Dave Dubeau treasure chest of genius. You mentioned that the entire
you're building me up pretty big there.
This better be good, dude. I mean, we talked about this. This better be amazing, and I'm confident that it will be. That's why I'm teeing you up like this. The concept of podcast hosting. So you have an amazing, fantastic show. We are coming up on 500 episodes.
Wow.
So we must be doing something right. But the missing piece for a lot of show hosts that do a podcast in order to generate business is they have a great podcast that does not generate business. Mm-hmm. So talk a little bit about how you came to the conclusion that if I was to teach one thing to entrepreneurial coaches, consultants, trainers, and speakers, the one key that will unlock their next level of success is podcast hosting in this very specific lead generating manner. How did you land on that in the first place?
Yeah, because I did everything wrong for the longest time, David. That's so I started my podcast back in 2018, which I think might have been around the time you started yours.
That's right.
But I wasn't as strategic as you were about it. And so I thought, hey, everybody's starting a podcast. I should probably have one of these things. It'd be a great way to, hopefully connect with other smaller people in my industry. At that time, I was really focused on real estate. So yeah. I started the Property Profits Real Estate Podcast. Not a bad title. And my goal was threefold, actually. Number one, I wanted to create a thought leadership platform for myself, so to be seen as an eminent authority, hopefully attract a big crowd of listeners and followers. Hopefully a bunch of them would realize I was a smart guy, and hopefully they'd reach out and want to do business with me. A lot of hoping, not much was happening, unfortunately, there, David, with the podcast. So I was doing a lot of things wrong. I was trying to do it all by myself. It was pretty hit and miss. It was pretty inconsistent. It was like weekly every once in a while, and every 2 weeks when I didn't get around to it, and then and that. It was also a great way to create content, so I didn't have to come up with unique stuff all the time. I could, interview smart people and use their stuff for content. So there were good things and were not so good things. And then about 4 years ago, I think, David, right around the time of the pandemic, that we're all in that kind of stuff, I was listening to a podcast and I heard this really smart young guy named Jamie Atkinson. I don't know if you've heard of him or not.
I have not.
But anyhow, Jamie was being interviewed and he talked about a very different way of looking at a podcast. He said, you know what? My podcast, I don't worry about audience growth. I don't worry about having a top 0.5% show in the world. I'm not trying to compete against the Joe Rogans of the world. I know that's very difficult to do.
Yeah.
So what I do instead is I interview the exact people that I want to have as my clients. And I feature them. And I do this instead of doing a weekly show and doing an interview once a week. I do 10, 15, 20 interviews every single week with these kind of people as my guests. And I turn my show into a direct lead generator. And I went, wow, that is smart. So that's when I decided, you know what, at that point, for whatever reason, I was struggling with some other different, I've been in marketing for a long time, but sometimes, stuff doesn't work or I didn't crack the, anyway, I was going through kind of a dry spell there. It was where my lead flow was pretty inconsistent. I said, that is smart. I'm going to start doing that. So I actually went and got training and coaching from this guy because that's what he was offering. And then I turned my show, Property Profits Real Estate Podcast, into a direct lead generator. And for the last 4 years, David, it's been the best, the number one way of generating business for my company is by interviewing my exact avatar. Now, here's the cool thing that I discovered from doing this, David. So now instead of my show, trying to be all about me and making me look good and smart and, attract people that way, now I flip the switch. Now, when I interview people, my goal is to make my guests look good, feel good, and sound good on my show.
Yeah.
And then I've come up with a very specific methodology for, in a non-slazy, non-bait and switch way, to get the conversation. So, for example, I'll zoom out for a second. I'm getting ahead of myself. So now my Property Profits Real Estate Podcast is really focused on interviewing capital raisers, fund managers, real estate syndicators, because in that business, that is my ideal market. So I interview them. And the first part of the interview is about what they do, what's their secret sauce, what do they invest in, where do they invest, what's kind of makes them unique. Then towards the end of the interview, which these interviews are short and sweet, they're about 20 minutes max, right? I start the conversation around capital raising, just kind of seeing what they're up to, what challenges they're facing, what they do that's a little bit different, that sort of thing, just to get the conversation going. Then what happens then, David, is after the interview is done and we're still in the Zoom green room, we're on Zoom together, do a little bit of housekeeping, and then I circle back and I'd say something. So for example, David, let's say you're one of my syndicator guests. I'd say, hey, David, it sounds like things are going great with your syndication business. And you mentioned that you're doing this, and that for connecting with new prospective investors. Let me ask you this. How do you feel about how that's working? Is that something that's 100% dialed in, or is there maybe a little room for improvement?
Always room for improvement.
Always room for improvement. Okay, cool. Well, we're doing something interesting with other syndicators and fund managers just like you, where we're getting them consistently booked in with 5 or 6 accredited investor meetings every single week on autopilot. And the way we're doing it is with a very unique kind of podcast. Is that something you might be interested in taking a look at? Boom, get them booked into a follow-up discovery call, then do your song and dance and get the sales conversation going there. So that has been what I've been doing myself for the last 4 years. And for the last year and a half or so, we've been working with other people and offering this as a turnkey done-for-you service.
Hey, super quick station break question. Have you seen our free executive briefing on elevating your CEO brand? Check it out right now at doitmarketing.com/webinar. And now back to the show. There must be some things that in your methodology are both to-dos and not to-dos before the interview, during the interview. You mentioned just now sort of the green room post-interview, and then also after the interview.
Yeah, there's lots.
So tell us a little bit what's in the playbook for the before part, the during part, in addition to what you just said about the green room once we turn the mics off, and then the after part if they don't immediately jump into a yes.
Yeah, great question. So David, the first big part of the before part is make sure that your show is set up and geared to attract your ideal avatar as the guest and as the audience. So a big mistake a lot of people make is they start their podcast and it's like, hey, the Dave Dubeau show. And as much as I think I'm great, nobody else gives a crap, right? That's a big mistake. Unless you're like a Joe Rogan or Tim Ferriss or some really big name type person, which most of us aren't, it doesn't make sense to name your podcast around you, or to make it specifically around your specialty. Now, let me explain this, David. So, for example, these days we've been working with a lot of real estate syndicators. So we create shows for them that appeal to their ideal avatar, an accredited investor who is a successful business owner, successful entrepreneur, successful C-suite executive. That's who they're going after. So we don't make their shows anything to do with real estate because those successful people are not real estate entrepreneurs. They're outside of the space. So we make the show that appeals to your avatar. Does that make sense? So that's the first thing. And then the second thing is make sure you know exactly who your avatar is. Who do you want to attract to be the guest on your show? And then it's going out there, finding these kind of people. And the nice thing is, instead of trying to convince them to join you on a sales call, we're leading with the giving hand. We're inviting them to be a guest on a podcast that's all about them, that's geared to make them shine, that's going to give them free PR, free marketing, free publicity, and content that they can use to get the word out. Because here's what we've discovered, David. Most of the people that we interview have never been interviewed on a podcast before. So it's kind of a big deal for them. It's kind of like being on TV back in the old days. And most of these people, even if they're very successful, get very few pats on the back at home or at work. So it's an ego stroke and a status thing for them to be a guest on the show, right?
Yeah.
So that's the thing. Create the show, attract the right people to be the guests on your show, and then getting to your specific points. Okay, well, what do you do? Especially if you understand that these people, a lot of them have never been a guest on the show. Well, you take a couple of minutes before you start the interview, and just like you and I did in the green room before we started this recording, break the ice, create a little bit of rapport, calm them down if they're newbies, all that kind of stuff. Then you do the
Quick question about that. Do you recommend, because some people say, hey, Jim, I'd love to have you on the show. Jim says yes. We send them the podcast interview link. Some other hosts say, hey, let's set up a 20-minute call. I'll lay out what the podcast is all about. So it's like a pre-interview call. Mm-hmm. Do you recommend a pre-interview call, especially with these people that might have never been on a podcast before? Or is that not a necessary step?
Absolutely unnecessary. I think that's just a colossal waste of time. Plus, I mean, these interviews are, 20 minutes long anyhow. So if you're doing a 20-minute pre-interview to do a 20-minute interview, that kind of kills
Good point.
And again, we got to remember, we're doing this at scale. So and our clients are busy people. They don't want to be spending tons and tons of time on this. The way that we do this is it's really only 2 hours twice a week is all that's needed from the podcast host to be able to do two or three of these interviews back to back to back very, very efficiently. So that's the way that we've set that up. So no, just a few minutes at the beginning. You can send them some information ahead of time, David, that kind of gives them the lay of the lands, just how they should be set up to do a successful podcast. Information kind of like what you send ahead of time with your podcast guests ahead of time.
And then, so this is so fascinating. And it's funny. I've talked to probably 2 or 3 other guests that have this sort of podcast prospecting strategy, but no one has laid this out to the level of detail that you and I are going into. So I really appreciate this. Problem I have found with executives, business owners, founders, if they've never been on a podcast, they often are a terrible guest, in my experience. Now, again, I've only invited a handful, but most of that handful has been like, oh God, this is like pulling teeth. Either they give you very short answers, like you said, it's a big deal for them, so they're nervous, and so they're giving you very protective, safe answers. They're not really revealing the good, the bad, and the ugly, and they're not savvy. Like when you're on a show, you turn on guest mode and you got the sound bites. You've got, you know how things work. When I'm on a show, same thing. First time guest, they're sort of lost at sea to a certain extent.
Fair enough.
How do you make first time guests sound great?
Sometimes you can't, David, to be perfectly honest. I mean, there's going to be some duds here. I guess part of the advantage of the way we do it is you're doing a lot more interviews than most podcasters do. Like if our clients are doing 5 or 6 interviews a week. Even if a couple of them are duds, The rest of them are pretty good. And then we keep them short and sweet. We keep the questions pretty open-ended.
Yeah.
And for myself personally, at least, I'm just a naturally curious person. So if somebody gives me a one-word answer, I'm going to dig in, and and for whatever reason, we're pretty good at putting the guests at ease,
Yeah.
and having just a natural, free-flowing conversation. Yeah. So
Perfect.
it hasn't been too much of a problem, but every once in a while you're going to get a dud.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, do you publish those duds anyway? Do you just put them up and just say, hey, listen, even if the guest is the only listener, I've opened a relationship and it's still worth doing?
It is. And usually there's still something decent in there.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we do for the guests, and this is the post-interview side of things, so I don't know if we want to jump into this right now.
Oh, let's please. Sure.
We create content for the guest to use to spotlight themselves on our show. So this does a couple of things. It's done for you content for them that they can use on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, whatever they're on, right? So they love that because they don't have to come up with content. Plus they can kind of strut their stuff. So we create short form videos and reels and all that kind of good stuff for them. Even if they only got 5 seconds of something smart to say, at least we slice and dice that part out.
Totally.
Them, right? And then the hidden benefit of that is, who are they going to share that with? Well, chances are, if we're interviewing a successful person, they hang out with other successful people. That's kind of who's in their network. So those people are going to see the show. They're going to hear about the show. They're going to get my call to action at the end. Hey, if you're this kind of person, you're interested in being a guest on the show, book in. So it's a great way to grow the audience and do indirect lead generation as well.
Now, let's say that you have the interview is over. You did great. They did great. You're saying, hey, would you be interested? We have this fairly unique methodology about using a very particular kind of podcast to generate 5 to 6 qualified appointments per week. Would that be something that's worth a quick chat? They say yes. Obviously, we go into the next step of the process. If they go, no, Dave, I'm good. We're pretty solid, and I appreciate it. This was a great interview. Blah 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 blah. So initially, they say no, or they're just not hot to trot. Is there a follow up, or do you say, hey, listen, that guy's a no. We're going to throw the small fish back in the sea?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So they're already in your system.
Yeah.
So whatever you're doing for your general communication with your list, they're going to be getting it. But I don't chase after them proactively. I'm not here to twist anybody's arm and convince them.
Sure.
Because here's the reality, David. At this point, now, not everybody that I interview is 100% great fit. So I don't make the offer for the call to everybody, right?
Yeah.
But out of the people that I do, 9 times out of 10, they say yes to the follow-up conversation. And same thing with their clients. Maybe they're not 9 times out of 10, but 7.5, 8 times out of 10, the person says yes. Because here's the nice thing. We've already opened that part of the conversation during the interview, right? We poked around a little bit. We've circled back to it after the interview. We know there's pain. We know there's a gap there. And we've created reciprocity, right? Because we've just made this hasn't been a 60 minutes expose kind of interview. It's been a warm, fuzzy, friendly interview. Chances are you do it right. They feel good about you. You feel good about them.
Yeah.
So there's just that kind of little sense of reciprocity. And they're very, very open to jumping on a discovery call, sales call, what have you, with you.
Yeah. Now, with your clients, the ones that sign on with you, like you said, these are busy executives. These are, they're investors. Or in some cases, and now with the High Ticket Success podcast, they're already successful coaches, consultants, trainers, etc. Is this your primary service? Is this a teaching thing? Is this a done with you thing? Or is this a done for you thing?
It's a done for you, with you thing.
Say more about that.
So yeah, when we're working with a new client, David, we will build them a podcast that appeals to their ideal avatar. So we do all the techie stuff, set everything up, branding, all that kind of good stuff done for them. We'll do the lead generation for them. We'll go out and find their ideal avatar, connect with them, invite them to be guests on the show.
And you do that as some sort of assistant type of persona, or you do it as them?
Both.
Okay.
Both. Yeah. And we're primarily, just full transparency, doing a lot of that through LinkedIn. Right.
Yeah.
So this works really, really well in the B2B type space.
Yeah.
And then we also do all of the editing, production, uploading, scheduling, content creation side of things for them. So my goal for our clients is the real time they have to put in is 2 hours twice a week. They have to be available to do these short, sweet interviews with their ideal client avatar. That's their role. 2 hours twice a week. Everything else gets done for them.
And if I'm doing the math correctly here, we're cranking out 5 or 6 episodes per week. So does that mean that it's a daily podcast?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's fascinating. How about that? Daily podcast. So we used to, so when you mentioned starting in 2018, the initial vision for this show was, hey, let's do it weekly. And then, of course, I just went nuts on the interviews and I just started racking up a whole bunch of interviews. So now we have this enormous backlog where if I was recording something in January, it wouldn't go live till like April. And I said, okay, well, that's too much. Let's go to twice a week. And then we worked through our inventory and I kept on recording and we kept this cadence going for maybe 12 months of twice a week. And then I started to run out of time and run out of buffer. So I said, okay, team, time to scale it back to once a week. And I think we did the shift twice. So we went from once a week to twice a week to once a week to twice a week. And now we're back to once a week again. But when you say it, it seems really doable, right? So my show is typically longer. The episodes are, 35, 40 minutes. We block a 45-minute window for this. Do you block 30 minutes for a 20-minute interview? Is that a 30-minute time block on the person's calendar?
Actually, we block 40 minutes.
Okay.
Interview, right. So in 2 hours, you can do up to 3 interviews. We got 3 interview slots twice a week. So they could do up to 6 interviews a week.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that gives them time because sometimes you're going to go over. Sometimes the person's going to be a little bit late. Plus, you need a little buffer time there for bio breaks and whatnot. So, so that gives us time, easily to have 3 to 5 minutes before the interview starts to break the ice, 20-minute interview, 5 minutes at the end, 7 minutes at the end to do the housekeeping and all that kind of stuff.
So the guest, like when you're inviting them, you say it's a 20-minute interview, but when they book it, they will see a 40-minute block on their calendar.
Yeah, we usually say it's a 20 to 30-minute conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then when they see a 40-minute block, it doesn't freak them out or anything like that.
So after the interview, if I'm hearing you correctly, there's no follow-up emails. I mean, obviously they get the press kit, right? Yeah. They get the videos, the reels, the posts, they get all the little done for you asset package. Is there a call to action to book a chat when they get the asset package?
No, your call to action is for them to book the chat in the green room right after the interview. You got to hit now while the iron's hot. Trying to follow up afterwards hardly ever works, David. You got to strike while the iron is hot.
One of the sales principles that I talk about in the Do It Selling book is you got to be brave on the call, not after.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
It's like, oh man, I hound them like nobody's business. It's like, no. First of all, no one likes hounding.
It's so easy to click unsubscribe, right?
Of course. But yeah, when you have them in the moment is the best time to make the ask. Holy smokes, so much value in this episode. Listen, if you are loving what you're hearing, feel free to download, subscribe, tell a friend, leave a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you're listening to The Selling Show. Now, back to the interview. Let's talk a little bit about targeting, because I think for the folks listening and for the folks that are like already, they're writing down in their notes, call Dave Dubeau about podcast strategy. My guess is the toughest part of this is for a new client to get very specific about who their ICP is. How do you either help them drill down so it's something that you and your team can use, or how do you just help them get clarity about who that really should be?
Yeah, well, hopefully they've spoken to a smart guy like you ahead of time and they have a decent idea of who their avatar is. But that's part of our whole onboarding process is to sit down with a person and just kind of really get that dialed in, figure out who can you best serve, who do you best serve? And a good way to do that is to look at, okay, well, let's look at your last 10 clients.
Yeah.
What do they have in common? What do they like? What do they dislike? What are they, are they geographically based? Are they demographically based? All of these different things, and then really get it dialed in that way, David.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm guessing, and again, this is just based on all of the folks I've worked with, people come in and they go, oh, Dave, the people that need me the most are, and then they describe the people that quote unquote need me the most. These are typically strugglers, losers, and broke ass morons. I'm just going to say it like it is. What you've said multiple times throughout our conversation today, already successful, busy people. These are the prospects of your clients. They're busy, they're successful, their calendar is full, they've already achieved a certain level of financial or otherwise success. Your clients now come on the scene and say, hey, I think I have some ways that might help you pour some fuel on the fire. If your clients come to you and say, Dave, the people that need us the most, the ones that are, just they're in terrible shape and they really need the help, do you guide them away from that and say, listen, let's not go after the people that need you. Let's go after the people that want you.
Want you and can afford you.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of interesting, David. Up until recently, I've really been working exclusively with capital raisers. So the nice thing is they have a very specific avatar. It's called an accredited investor. It's someone who earns at least $200,000 a year consistently and or has a net worth of $1 million or more, not counting their own home, right? So we know who that avatar is. Now, moving into working with high ticket coaches and consultants and advisors, that's why the thing's called high ticket. Like, you have to have a track record of selling your thing, your high ticket thing, to a certain kind of clientele. Yeah. So I don't like to work with absolute newbies, to be perfectly frank with you, David.
Of course.
This is not a good program for those kind of folks. It's a very good program for people who are already doing well. They're just looking for another or an additional lead generation process to get them a consistent flow of their ideal clients on the books every single week. That's who this is dialed in for. Yeah. I stopped working with beginners a number of years ago. I was just getting way too frustrated with that. So yeah, I prefer to work with people that already know what they're doing.
Yes, for sure. Let me ask you about, so these already successful people, I'm imagining they're looking at this strategy as a substitute or in addition to things like Facebook ads, SEO, lead magnets, Facebook Lives, live stream video. Would you say that most of your clients stop doing everything else and just are rocking this 5 to 6 appointments a week through the podcast? Or can they stop doing everything else?
I recommend they don't. Like, if you got stuff that's working, keep doing it. But if it's not working, stop doing this. So no, I never recommend that you have a one-legged stool, David, even though I think my thing's the best thing since sliced bread, right? But you don't want to be completely dependent on any one marketing strategy. That's been my experience over the last 35 years. Anyhow. Yeah.
And then you give them the assets to promote the podcast. I'm curious, how do you promote each episode to give it maximum reach in addition to the marketing kit that you give to each guest?
Yeah. So this is going to sound a little sacrilegious, David, because we're coming from more of a traditional podcasting background. I don't worry too much about promoting the podcast. The podcast is a lead generator, right? Now, we do provide content for our clients, the hosts.
Sure.
So they can post their episodes or their favorite episodes on their social media and all that kind of good stuff. We rely a lot more on organic growth. So the guests sharing their episodes, which they actually do, because again, you and I were kind of accustomed to interviewing people that are already used to being interviewed on podcasts.
Yes.
They hardly ever promote their episodes because it'd be too much. They're getting interviewed 4 or 5 times a week. But these newbie guests have never been interviewed. It's a big deal. They get the word out, and we start to grow the show organically that way.
Well, as we're landing the plane, I've got 2 final questions for you.
Sure.
The final question is, what goodies can we share with people? How can folks get in touch with you? But even before we get to that, this has been such a great masterclass in, I'm going to call, high-level, content-based lead generation. So we're not just saying, hey, you want to buy my stuff? You want to buy my stuff? You're inviting them. And like you said, it's a give first, because you're going to showcase and spotlight their brilliance and their success story. But if people were to take one overall concept from this entire notion of podcasting as a lead generator, what do you hope that one big takeaway idea should be?
Yeah, it really should be that. It's lead with the giving hand, right? That's for so many years, myself, speaking for myself, it's always been like trying to figure out ways to say, hey, look at me, look at me, look at me, pick me, pick me, pick me, which is fine. There's a place for that. But I tell you what, David, when I flip the switch and now it's about, hey, I want to feature you, then I'm not worried about being the guy in the spotlight. You're automatically seen as an authority with your guest because you're the host of the show, right? So they're already, especially if they've never been a guest on the show before, they're already looking up to you. They're kind of nervous. The positioning is great versus just booking somebody directly into a sales call.
Yeah.
So that whole lead with the giving hand, make the other person look good, feel good, sound good. Yes, you do want to massage the conversation towards what it is that you do, but not in an overly obvious kind of way. And then just coming up with that very casual kind of way to connect the dots in the green room after the interview to create that curiosity, pique that interest, and then you lean on that reciprocity that you've got with the person and get them booked into the sales call there.
Yeah, so good. It's almost like an inbound, outbound strategy, right? Where the outbound is, hey, be a guest. And then from that point on, the experience gets them to raise their hand and say, hey, Dave Dubeau, let's talk about this podcasting thing because I think I might be able to use this. That's the ideal thing, is they just they go, I think this is relevant to me, and I'd like to learn more about how you help people like me. Really, really great. So speaking of Dave Dubeau, how do people get more Dave? What links and resources can we share in the show notes?
Thanks so much, David. So for folks that are listening or watching this, if you're interested in getting more details about this, how to set this up, what kind of equipment to use, how to, kind of looking at some examples of the kind of questions you should be asking, how to transition from interview into discovery call. I put together a very simple little 3-step guide, and you can get that at my site, highticketpodcasting.com/10K clients. So that's the number 10K clients. highticketpodcasting.com/10K clients. Because that's the whole goal, is to use a podcast to get high ticket clients.
Boom. Mic drop right there. Dave Dubeau, you are a rock star. I appreciate you. Thank you for sharing all that value with us today.
David, thank you so much. It's been an absolute thrill to be on your show.
And that wraps up another episode of The Selling Show. Hey, tell you what, if you like us, rate us and review us on Apple Podcasts, subscribe, tell a friend, go grab the notes and downloads and extras at thesellingshow.com. See you next time.